The following is a special presentation of News Radio WDEV, the Governor's Debate from the World's Fair in Tunbridge, Vermont.
And good morning again, Vermont. We are very happy to be here at the Tunbridge Fair, where we are about to launch into a debate between our candidates for governor, the major party candidates. Phil Scott is an incumbent governor. He's a Republican. He's been in office 2 years. Vermont is still one of the very few states that has a two-year term for governor these days. And Christine Hallquist is the Democratic challenger. She won that party's nomination in the August primary, and they're gearing up for their fall campaigns. And, of course, these debates, we had the debate between our candidates for lieutenant governor yesterday and governor today. These, I think these may mark a sort of a kickoff point for the fall campaign, and it's great to have both candidates here. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
And I wanted to also mention our underwriters here for this for the program today: the Central Vermont Chamber of Commerce, Champlain Valley Equipment, and GE Plastics. We want to thank them for their help and sponsorship. And I want to go right into we're gonna pass over opening statements. We will have closing statements, so you can sort of offer some conclusory remarks then, if you like. And but we're going to go right into questions here. And I wanted to start with Ms. Galloway. Anne Galloway is I should mention, is my co-moderator here. She and I are going to be switching back and forth on asking questions, and we're going to ask you, each of the candidates, to have 1 minute to respond to the questions, and you both get a minute to respond to each question, and we'll try to alternate back and forth as to who goes first and that sort of thing. And we're going to have a few rounds in terms of topics. We are going to start with the economy. We're going to go to education, the environment, and then we'll have a sort of miscellaneous round in the fourth section of the debate. At the end of each round, if providing we have time, I hope we do, we'll try to squeeze in a question from each candidate to the other. One question, and it'll probably be a case where we invite one of you to ask a question at the end of the first round, and then the other one to ask a question at the end of the second round, and we'll sort of go with the flow there, if that's okay. And so I wanted to ask Anne Galloway to ask the first question of our candidates, and to whom would you like to put it, Anne?
I'm going to start with Governor Scott. Do you support raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour? If so, how do you resolve questions about the benefit cliff? If not, how do you persuade low-wage workers that you've got their backs?
Yeah. Well, I want every Vermonter to make more money. I think that's important. I have not supported, as you know, I did not support artificially raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour because it does put many areas at risk, particularly the rural areas of our state along the Connecticut River, down this area here in Tunbridge, where we see, we have to compete with New Hampshire. There's a border right there, Connecticut River. You could literally swim across and not have any income tax or sales tax and a lower minimum wage. So it would put many businesses at risk along that corridor and up in the Northeast Kingdom. So there's some areas of the state that are doing better than others, but I would argue that this would have a detrimental effect on the economy in Vermont.
Governor, even if it's introduced very gradually as opposed by the Senate?
Well, again, we're doing that now. I was part of the Senate when we debated this issue many years ago. And I remember they put a cost of living increase in the minimum wage, and they said, I remember this distinctly, and I voted for it, but they said, we will never, if we pass this today, we will never have to debate this again, we'll never have to have this conversation again, because it will automatically increase with the cost of living throughout eternity and create that base. So since then, there actually has been another correction since then. So we continue to debate this issue. And I'd say if we focus on the economy, this will lift all boats. The wages will increase. We have a supply and demand issue as it is. So I believe that it's unnecessary to raise the minimum wage to $15.
And your response to this question, Ms. Hallquist?
Well, I will tell you that's the same rhetoric I've heard since the early 80s. It actually started with Richard Nixon, and then Ronald Reagan sealed the deal. And if you look at the minimum wage adjusted for inflation from the late 60s, it would be $22 an hour right now, and which works out to about $44,000 a year. And people had benefits which got you over $50,000. So we've seen this systematic attack on the working class. By the way, a two-bedroom unit to live in takes $22 an hour. So we've seen a systematic degradation of the working class based on this, quote, trickle-down philosophy, which has totally failed. And it's failing us this year. We talk about this great growing economy, but the working class is not seeing real growth in their wages. It's a way to keep the money with the wealthy.
But what about Phil Scott's assertion that this would hurt small businesses in the Northeast Kingdom and along the Connecticut River?
Well, I will tell you, I'm a good business person. I know how to do cost control. But the other flip side of that is you got to figure out how to increase the revenues. So having a long-term plan for growing jobs in rural Vermont and growing wages and really getting that healthy churn back in the economy where you have higher-paying jobs, that's an important part of this. But at the same time, we've got to raise the minimum wage and start getting back to where we were in the late 60s.
All right, a question for Ms. Hallquist. I wanted to ask, one key to economic development and to attracting younger entrepreneurs is good communications infrastructure, including cellular phone and broadband internet services. Many areas of Vermont lack these services and have services of inferior quality. How will you address this? Are public or co-op approaches the way to go, given the poor performance of the private sector to date?
Well, I will tell you, you got to remember our electric utilities are regulated utilities. So they are to carry out the public policies of the state. And our copper infrastructure is wholly inadequate to meet the needs of business today. I'm committed to connecting fiber to every home and business in this state so that Vermonters can be connected to the internet, same speed as the urban areas. And that will create a real attraction for young people and entrepreneurs. Rural America was electrified. We ran a wire to every home and business in the state in the 30s. We saw the same demographic shifts that happened in the 30s, and we can change that demographics. We don't need to accept that this aging demographic is something we can't change, and running fiber to every home and business will change that.
Governor Scott?
Well, obviously, broadband and cell service is incredibly important to the state. In fact, two previous governors had promised long before now that we would have that. But we're making some gains. About 90% have broadband access at this point in time throughout the state, but we still have that 10% to go. It'd be interesting for people to note what the communities, with the top 13 communities in the state that have the highest 21st century broadband access and capacity are areas that would surprise you. Springfield being one, Brattleboro being another, Newport being another. Burlington's on the list. But my point is, it's not the entire answer. We have to address some of the cost problems that we have in the state, some of the affordability issues that we face as a state, in trying to attract more people to the state, the demographics and so forth. So it's not the entire answer, but it certainly is part of the equation and something that we need to continue to work on.
Anne Galloway.
Do you support a paid family leave bill, Governor?
I do support paid family leave if it's voluntary. As you know, I vetoed the bill last year because I thought it was a bit disingenuous. Even the Joint Fiscal Office talked about that it wasn't going to be enough. That there would be a shortfall had they moved forward with that, and a payroll tax as well. I had said, I put a clear line in the sand that we weren't going to raise taxes and fees in the last 2 years, and that was raising a payroll tax on Vermonters. So I believe that there's another approach, a voluntary approach. New Hampshire was working on one over the last year or two. Maybe we could join forces with them and Maine or some other group to expand the pool, but I believe it should be voluntary in nature and not create another tax on Vermonters.
How does that comport, though, with your desire to bring in 11,000 new workers in Vermont? Wouldn't this help young families?
Yeah, I believe it would help young families, but also I believe my education plan would help young families as well. A cradle-to-career approach where we're spending $1.7 billion to educate about 75,000 students, and I believe that we could do that much differently and have more investment in early care and learning with some of that money that we already spend. So I don't believe that we need to increase another tax, add another tax to already overburden Vermonters and make us out of sync with uncompetitive with other states as well.
Ms. Hallquist, what's your view on this issue?
Well, I think I think we have you got to really understand what's happening to struggling Vermonters where they're not having a working wage. People are struggling to work 3 jobs. I look at the fact that that I could leave my job. My school was 12 minutes down the road, and when my kids were getting in trouble, I could get down the road and talk to the teachers and be involved. But if you're closing schools and you got to drive an hour or 2 and you don't have family leave, what's that do to the children? Family leave is a critical component of having healthy families, because you want to stay involved with your child's education, your child's issues. But when you're struggling and working 3 jobs and you don't have family leave, I think that's just uncivilized.
So you would support a payroll tax to support family leave?
I would support a family leave bill. We can figure out how to fund it, but I think it's mandatory that we require family leave. So, good employers do that, but not all employers do that. We've got to create that opportunity for those people that are living on the lowest rungs of the economic ladder.
So you're saying yes, we should tax to pay for this program?
I'm saying we'll figure out how to fund it. Again, this whole tax issue we will fund it responsibly, however that needs to be done. I'm not afraid of having a tax to be civilized and do those things. But we'll figure ways to fund things in whatever the best way possible. But that's a collaborative decision. That's why the governor should be working collaboratively with the legislature to figure out how to do the right thing.
Okay, Governor Scott, let me ask you. We mentioned that number of 11,000 new workers needed annually. That's from the Vermont Futures Project, which says we need to add about that number of workers to our workforce every year. What suggestions do you have to increase the workforce?
Well, again, we've been doing some of that. As you know, over the last number of years, I've talked about the problem that we face, the 631. We have 6 fewer workers in our workforce every single day. And there are fewer people working today than there were in 2009. And so that's some of our problem. The good news is, since January, the economy's heating up. We have jobs available, and we're putting more people to work. So since January, we've put about 4,000 more people to work. That's working out for us. I think there needs to be more certainty with the tax structure throughout Vermont. I think that provides more opportunity. And we have jobs. I mean, that's the other good news. We have jobs, but we need more workers. We need more people here. And again, it's almost like the canary in the mine, the mine shaft. When you think about 30,000 fewer students than there were 20 years ago, that's the problem. We don't have as many of our youth here. We don't have them. We have a low birth rate. We're not attracting more people to the state. And again, that's what we're focusing on in everything we do with workforce development, making Vermont more affordable, growing the economy is going to bring more people into the state.
What steps do you want to take to attract more people to Vermont?
Well, again, when I talk with our youth about what it is that will keep them here, the good news is we graduate about 10,000 students every single year from our colleges and universities. That's good news. But we need to keep them here. So when I engage them and ask them what it would take for them to stay, they want a good opportunity. They want a good paying job in order to do that. We've got that. Check that box. They need decent, affordable housing. We were able to 2 years ago, even though we didn't raise a single tax or fee, we were able to put that housing bond together, $35 million housing bond, leveraging another $65 million for a $100 million housing bond, the single largest investment in housing Vermont has ever seen. We're able to do that, check that box. But they do the math. It has to be affordable for them, and tax structure matters.
Christine Hallquist.
Well, I got to tell you, we talk. Governor Scott talks about this thing, claiming that broadband's available. Well, this is the terminology the telecom providers are using. Broadband on copper can't happen by definition. So until we get fiber to every home and business, we're not going to get young people and entrepreneurs coming to rural Vermont. 2/3 of Vermonters lives in rural Vermont. And getting connectivity is as important as electricity today. You will not get young people to Vermont if they can't get connected. But of course, young people are going to come to Vermont if they can get connected, because we're the safest state. We've got we're the healthiest state. We've got the best education system, and we've got this beautiful, these beautiful vistas, and our people are as beautiful as those vistas. So we have a very attractive place for young people to live, but it isn't going to happen if people can't get connected.
Anne Galloway.
Last question. Programs like TIF districts and VEGI are designed to promote business growth, but are sometimes criticized as failing to demonstrate they're returning public investment by promoting growth that wouldn't have happened anyway. Governor Scott, do you support these programs? Should they be expanded or curtailed?
Yeah, absolutely support them. Believe they should be expanded. Case in point, I think if you just take a drive through, anyone listening from St. Albans, Franklin County area, knows the benefit of a TIF district. Had it not been for the TIF district, I don't believe you'd see what you're seeing in St. Albans today, which is a transformation of what it was just 10 or 15 years ago. Incredible growth, opportunities, beautiful downtown. And I would look at some of the other areas as well. Take a look at Bennington. There's another struggling area that we need to pay attention to. If it weren't for the newly expanded TIF district, they wouldn't be building the Putnam block as we speak, because they wouldn't have the resources to do so. Nobody's going to move forward on this without some incentives, and this has been incredibly powerful, and we've shown what it can do. And I realize the criticism on the other side, but I would advocate, as someone who's been in business and done some developing myself, you need every resource you can to make it viable.
Christine Hallquist.
Well, I'm proud to say the Liz Gamache worked for me when she became mayor of St. Albans and started down this process, really getting the town fired up over the redevelopment using tax increment financing. It's a very powerful tool. It requires tremendous gubernatorial support. And I think revitalizing the downtowns is a critical part of growing Vermont's rural economy. I talk about having young people and entrepreneurs move to rural Vermont, but they need a place to go. And I'll talk about Morrisville, which is my town that I love dearly. We've got 2 pubs that we get musical entertainment. You see your friends. They've got food. I've got my church, the United Community Church of Morrisville. We've got our movie theater. And we have our schools. All these are critical components, and the school becomes the baseline for that town. So, yes, rebuilding those downtowns is important, and I'm also impressed with the work that's happening with the Putnam Block in Bennington, Springfield, and if you look at White River Junction, the transformation of White River Junction has been phenomenal over the past decade.
We're about to wrap up the economic section of our debate. Governor Scott, do you have a question you would like to ask about the economy to your opponent, Christine Hallquist?
Well, I've been reading some of your comments, Christine, and you've talked a lot about what we need to do in this state and in terms of taxes and so forth. And you said that no new tax structure and mantra is really a no brain activity, and I would advocate that it takes a lot of thought to live within your means. You seem to be lured to just that natural knee-jerk reaction, raising taxes to solve every problem. Have you found any ways to actually save money?
Come on, Phil. I'm a business person. I've been around a long time, worked with a lot of business. And I ran an electric utility where we managed to keep rates flat for 5 years straight while we solved climate change, getting to 96% carbon free. A good business person doesn't just do cost control, because cost control puts you out of business. You got to have a long-term vision of how you're going to grow your economy and grow that revenue. I have the long-term vision. It's tied to a very important infrastructure investments. It's the basics of how we've built America from the beginning and built in the beginning. You've got to make those infrastructure investments. Oh, by the way, when I talk to running fiber to every home and business, it's not going to cost the taxpayers any money. So we need a leadership that knows how to put more food on the table, not just to be fighting over the scraps.
Let's get right back to our questions now. We're going to shift topics to education. We've been talking about the economy so far in the debate, and we want to, obviously, education is always a big issue in Vermont, and so I'll start by asking Christine Hallquist, the Democratic nominee for governor, a question. Vermont Vermont's student body has been shrinking fast in recent decades with already high staff-to-student ratios growing. How do you see us addressing this? Is more distance learning a possibility? Will students have to travel longer distances to regional schools? What about van pools of teachers who perhaps could have classes at one school in the morning and another in the afternoon? Ms. Hallquist.
Well, first of all, I want to challenge any idea that we're not in control of our destiny in terms of our demographic shift. I've spent 10 years at the national level analyzing this, and we're a microcosm of rural America, and we can change that shift and grow and put more people back in our schools. So I don't want to see these rural schools close. And I feel so sorry for my kids were on the bus an hour and a half a day. I chose to live in a pretty rural part of Vermont, but there are parents who are going to put their kids on the bus for 2 hours a day. We can optimize our schools. If you talk to the teachers and you work collaboratively with people, you can come up with the best solutions. My whole experience in life is the employees come up with the best solutions, not management. But that said, there are ways we can do a better job with our schools, and closing schools is not, and it actually goes against growing our rural economy. Because when a school closes, essentially people are not going to move there. There's some great things we can do to optimize our schools, which includes, when we connect every school and business with fiber, you have the opportunity to tap in some of the best educational programs in the world. So let's build a vision of, let's reverse this downward cycle thinking. I believe we can grow, and as we grow, we provide more revenue. That more revenue provides us the opportunity to do more, which provides more growth. I'm talking about changing the cycle into a growth cycle, not a downward cycle.
Governor Scott.
Well, actually, just to answer one of the questions, 260 out of the 300 schools that we have right now have access to high-speed broadband. So that is very important to us. Interactive learning is very important to us. But again, let's go back and see what the problem is. We have 30,000 fewer students than we did 20 years ago. We have to address that. We're spending $1.7 billion to educate around 75,000 students. That equates to almost over $22,000 per student, one of the highest in the nation, and we've got to do better. We have good schools right now, but we could have great schools if we just invested earlier. Early care and learning is so important. The child's brain develops immensely fast from 0 to 5. We should be investing more there with the resources we have right now within the $1.7 billion as well. Higher education, and when I say that, not just 4-year programs, but more trades training. We should be cradle to career continuum of learning is what we need to focus on. If I gave some of your listeners, if I said to them, I have a check here for $1.7 billion, I want to educate our 75,000 students, what would you do with it? I would advocate that things would look much different than they do today. And we have to have the courage to think outside the box in order to do that and deliver that. And there's an answer there, but it's about broadening it without spending more money.
Okay, Anne Galloway has the next question.
I'd just like to follow up on that. Governor, you say that you want to think outside the box, but have you presented a plan that would show people what this new system would look like?
Not exactly, but I talk a lot. Again, the K through 12 system is something that is near and dear to many, but we need to, again, invest more in early care and learning. And that's part of the answer. And again, more trades training, which we're doing right now. We've actually invested more in early care and learning. We've actually invested more in our state colleges, but we need to do more of that within the $1.7 billion that we're spending today, because there's a better path forward. We're stuck in the past, and we can't forget about the kids, and that's what we keep forgetting. The opportunities for our kids. When we talk about not wanting to close schools, and I'm not advocating to close schools, but at the same time, when you have Rochester that had 2 students in their senior class, it begs the question, should we do something different? Or what opportunities do they have? Do they have music opportunities, theater, sports? With only 2 students, I would say probably not. We have to think about the kids and what's best for them. And I'm sure if we all work together, again, to not just look at what we've been doing, but actually be bold and do something different, we'll come up with a solution. But it takes everyone working together in order to do that.
Thank you. Ms. Hallquist, what about this question about the super small schools that have 1 or 2 kids in a grade in the high school? Is that appropriate learning for students in Vermont?
Well, let me just respond about Rochester. The interesting thing about Rochester is, you look at decades ago, we had Granville Manufacturing there, we had Hancock Plywood. There were jobs there. The reason these schools are dwindling because the jobs don't exist. And I believe that the real answer is creating a long-term vision. A good leader creates a vision that outlasts the leadership. And we should be building towards restoring our rural economy and growing our rural economy. And we can do that with the type of entrepreneurial jobs that people want to work on in rural Vermont. So I want us to think beyond today and think beyond how are we going to reverse this trend, because Vermont is a wonderful place that people want to live.
Okay, the next question goes to Ms. Hallquist. Some Vermont schools have been criticized for not dealing well with the increasing racial and ethnic diversity of their students. The ACLU has pointed to tougher discipline against students of color for similar infractions to those committed by white students as helping to create a, quote, school-to-prison pipeline, unquote. What can be done to address this issue?
Yeah, and I should point out that I'm very disappointed that Phil Scott had vetoed the racial justice bill with the argument that, he wants to have the person in charge report to him. I think implicit bias is something people don't understand. I learned a lot when I transitioned from male to female of just the gender hierarchy. It's one thing to understand it; it's the other thing to live it. I think we have a lot of work to do, and I would put a third party, truly independent of the governor, citizen oversight board in place, and we would collect data on policing, employment, and schools on where those disciplines are being directed. And if I look what's happening in Vermont, we clearly have issues. I feel so bad for Kaya Morris, who's now with the change that's happening in terms of our underbelly of politics. We've emboldened some of these folks that have been quiet in the past in terms of their bigotry. So we have a lot of work to do, and it needs to be done by an independent third party.
Governor Scott.
Well, again, tolerance, respect, civility, but I want to go back to the racial diversity bill. I think it's being disingenuous by Christine to say that I just vetoed the bill without telling the rest of the story, because facts matter. I actually did veto the bill. It was unconstitutional. I brought that up with the House and the Senate. The House passed one. They got it. They passed the bill that I could have signed. The Senate in the last day, for whatever reason, you can read into that whatever you want, put the poison pill in. And then at that point, I vetoed the bill, signed an executive order that would do everything that they wanted to do. Then we came back in a special session, got together, and had a racial bill that I could sign, and a much stronger bill. So I did sign it proudly. So to say that just telling the half the story is really being disingenuous. So again, more respect, civility, something I practiced my entire life, and tolerance. And we need to do a better job at what we're doing. And I would say the same thing about Kaya Morris. I think it's unfortunate what she's going through, and that she didn't run again.
Anne Galloway has the next question.
Ms. Hallquist, what is the role of state government in trying to control school spending?
The role of state government is to work collaboratively with the schools and the school boards. Barking orders out of Montpelier, coming up with arbitrary metrics, and then beating up the school boards and the teachers is a total failure of leadership. I believe in collaborative leadership versus command and control. Command and control is great during fires and power outages, but the rest of the time you got to be working with people. So the state government's role is to create a vision and work collaboratively with folks to come up with a solution, not to veto things in the last 2 weeks of the session and be paternalistic. My whole success in life is about working with the employees to come up with the best solution. That's the role of government.
All right, and Governor Scott.
Local control obviously is near and dear to many of us in Vermont, but we lost that with Act 60. And so the reality is Montpelier does play a role. Obviously, the school boards have to do what they can in terms of the budget and developing budgets. But with the funding mechanism that's in place, it puts all the burden again within the state's jurisdiction in some respects. And I would there are many who say the education fund, the single largest investment expenditure in state government, the $1.7 billion. Some feel that we can't control the education fund. They're somehow different than everything else, all the other funds that we have in the state, and I would disagree. We can control that. We should be working together, but we need a common goal in order to do that, and we can't just keep working the same way we've always done it, because it's getting us the results of just increased spending, increased costs, and it's really, and that's what property taxes are all about. You know, that's where we derive all the income for education through the property tax system, basically, mostly. And that's led to high property taxes, and that's the issue, that we need to focus on that, to deliver high quality education at a rate that people can afford, and that's that cradle to career continuum I'm talking about.
Governor Scott, do you think that the top priority of schools should be to train students to participate in the workforce, or to educate students on citizenship, critical thinking, and artistic involvement or appreciation?
Yes. Yeah, I think it's all the above. You know, I think we schools we have to think about basic life skills, trying to develop, you know, engage with students, find out where their interests are, what their strengths are, work on that, and provide for a career. But at the same time, you need to tap into the imagination, creativity of the students to determine what that is, and it's in the arts, it's in music, it's in theater, it's in every aspect. I would say as well in the trades. You know, industrial arts was something that was really near and dear to my heart when I was in school, and led me to do all the things I'm doing today. So you never know where that's going to take you, but you have to experience that, and we have to. That's why, when you have these small schools that don't offer all these programs, they never get an opportunity to find out where their interests lie and what their strengths are. And that's why it's so important to be able to deliver to the students and think about what their needs are.
Ms. Hallquist?
Yes, you know, I know that when I was growing up, I was certainly a non-traditional learner. Fortunately, I had a great set of parents that I stayed close with and learned a lot from them. My son, he was interested in film, went to the Green Mountain Technical Career Center in Morrisville, which is a great technical school. We do have to make and create variety for all students, and regardless of what those needs are, we can figure out how to fill those needs. And you know, and so every student is different. You know, we've got to. I believe, I've always said, everyone has a gift. And you just have to, not just have to, but you have to really reveal what that gift is, and encourage and support that gift, whatever it is.
Okay, and actually, I want to go to a question now from one of the candidates to the other, and I believe it's Ms. Hallquist's turn to ask Governor Scott a question. This will be on education.
Yeah, I think, you know, when it comes to education, I want to ask you regarding, you know, where you're headed in terms of our rural infrastructure. You know, what is your, as we lose rural business, close rural school, how do you plan to reverse those trends? What's your long-term plan from what's your vision for the state, and how you keep saying that we keep reducing students. What's your plan to change that long term?
Well, it's about changing the trajectory. We are an aging state, second oldest state in the country right now. We are losing our workforce. We need to bring in more people. I think immigration is part of the answer, to be honest with you. In fact, I reached out to the White House and sent them a letter asking them if they had more refugees. I know that they've cut back on some of the refugee program, but if they were looking for a place for a new home for these refugees, we would take them because there are a lot of communities that would enjoy that and would be very helpful to us in many, many different ways. But immigration, and that's legal immigration, bringing people in from other states, other countries, in order to take advantage of all we have to offer. We have a beautiful state, have a lot to offer, great quality of life, one of the safest states in the country. So what we need to do is bring more people in to replicate that and invest in the downtowns like we're doing. Because you take Reedsboro, for instance. For those of you who have never been to Reedsboro, it was once a thriving center of economic activity. They had two theaters. They had a hospital. They had 4 dealerships, auto dealerships. They had a train going through. And it's nothing like that today, but they have spirit, and they want to return to their grandeur. So investing in these communities, Springfield, Brattleboro, Northeast Kingdom, Newport, those are the areas that we need to focus on.
Okay, we are going to go to our top of the hour break here on the Dave Graham Show on WDEV. We'll be continuing our gubernatorial debate when we return after some words from our sponsors and from some CBS News. And we will continue this debate after the top of the hour, and stay with us, folks. Sir, we are back at the Tunbridge Fair with our debate between Christine Hallquist, the Democratic nominee for governor, and the Republican incumbent, Governor Phil Scott. And we have covered economic issues in the first part of the debate, and then we went to some education discussion here. And right now we are going to shift our attention to the environment, and I am going to ask my moderator colleague here, Anne Galloway of VTDigger.org, to ask the first question.
Ms. Hallquist, do you support a carbon tax on fossil fuels?
Well, I'll answer that question by saying I've been committed to solving climate change. That's been my passion in life. In 2004, I went and listened to the Intergovernmental Climate Change Commission present in Quebec City, and I recognized that the electric grid could be key to solving this. So I've worked really long and hard. When I left Vermont Electric Co-op, we were 96% carbon-free, and we did that without a rate increase for 5 years. So I know that climate change can be done without increasing costs. And of course, the way you get there is through innovation. So I'm open to all innovative ideas. You know, in my studies, when you look at public policy initiatives, a price on carbon is one of the most effective policy initiatives for mitigating carbon. Does that mean I support it? I'm going to say not right away, that's for sure, because I also, in my job, we served 18 of the 25 poorest communities in Vermont, and we cannot make things any more difficult for people living on the economic margin. So I believe it deserves a deep dive, just like any other new idea. I would never write anything off from the beginning, but at the same time, I'm paying very close attention. Most important to me is those people living on the economic margins right now.
Governor Scott?
No, I'm not in favor. In fact, I'd veto a carbon tax if it came to my desk. I think it's a very regressive tax, would hurt the rural areas of our state. There are other ways to deal with this. They can't afford to pay any more than they are today. And so, no, I'm not in favor.
Governor Scott, in an effort to preserve and enhance water quality, Vermont farmers are being asked to step up with sometimes expensive new measures and to respond to regulations some regard as burdensome when many are already struggling economically. Do you support putting pressure on farmers to adhere to best management practices? Do you fear these new costs and restrictions could be the last straw for some?
Yeah, we're seeing tremendous pressure on our farmers, in particular dairy farmers. Right now, low milk prices is devastating for many, but they're stepping up. They're doing a lot in terms of best management practices, injection with manure injection in some of their fields, crop rotations, buffers, and so forth. They're doing it, and we need to applaud them for doing so. we're all in this together. We want our waterways to be clear and clean. Lake Champlain is one of our most precious resources. We've committed to this in my administration, and we'll see this through. But we need to help those farmers, assist them in doing the right thing. The phosphorus innovation challenge is an area that we think we can make some tremendous gains, and I'm just incredibly impressed by what we're doing so far.
And Ms. Hallquist, what's your answer on this one?
Yeah, of course, serving northern Vermont, the top 20% of Vermont, I've worked with farmers for decades now. And yesterday I was up at Lake Carmi meeting with folks, and I think folks recognize the struggle that farmers have. And I think this problem, farmers have always tried to comply with state regulations, and when we shift those regulations and change those regulations, we all got to share in that burden of helping the farmer out. Dairy is a basic part of Vermont, and I would never want to see dairy go away, and I want to see the farmers do better. And part of that, of course, again, ties to the fiber plan. We can give farmers the opportunity to move into more value-added products that they can sell globally, following the Hardwick Food Hub model of shared processing and packaging equipment. So now you can take a farmer might be doing dairy today, but they can start getting regular income from their finished products. So moving, like, for example, growing blueberries, and then packaging blueberry jam that's GMO-free, organic, with the Vermont brand, that can be sold through a distribution network all throughout the world. That's how we're going to help those farmers get out of this in the long term. That model has worked with our maple industry. In the maple industry, we took years to build that distribution network. I mean, Japan loves our maple products. So we can do the same thing, but the good news is we've got the World Wide Web, which allows you to build distribution networks very quickly.
Anne Galloway.
Ms. Hallquist, State Treasurer Beth Pierce has said Vermont should expect to spend $25 million a year for the next 20 years to restore and protect the quality of Lake Champlain and other Vermont waters. Do you support expenditures of this scale? Where should the state get the money?
Yeah, so that's a very important strategic investment. Again, going back to good business people, we recognize the importance of making those strategic investments. And our waterways, 94% of our waterways are impacted by this issue. So it's affecting all of Vermont. And part of Vermont's brand, is that beautiful, healthy brand. So it's really important we clean up those waterways. And, oh, by the way, Beth Pierce's plan is a plan that's very solid. It's been reviewed by many. And $1 invested today saves $3 in the long term. So this is a critical part of our infrastructure. We have to find places to get that money. And again, that's what a good leader working collaboratively with the legislature will find the money. We have to invest in that. I will work collaboratively with the legislature to find out where the money comes from. Nobody likes to pay, but at the same time, we all pull together and we work shoulder to shoulder. We come up with a collaborative decision that we all own, and then it won't be this, pointing fingers at each other in the end.
Thank you. Governor, do you support expenditures of $25 million a year to clean up Lake Champlain, and where do you think the state should get the money to clean up the lake?
Well, yes, I do. In fact, we've exceeded that. We've fully funded that Clean Water Initiative for both fiscal 18 and fiscal 19 to the levels and exceeding the levels of the recommendation by the Treasurer. In the last legislative session, there was the beverage container deposit bill. That's going to generate another couple $1 million. We already have some money coming in place through existing resources. I believe there is enough capacity within the system. I have a couple of ideas that we're going to be unfolding in our budget if I'm successful in November. In our budget for January, that we'll be fully committed to continuing down this in the future. As well, I think TDI, the conduit proposed for Lake Champlain, that's not over. I know that we weren't selected in the first or second round in Massachusetts, but but I believe they'll come to their senses and find out that this is a viable alternative that's fully permitted, ready to go, and satisfies their needs with bringing hydro power and renewable energy down into those areas of high density like Boston. So we're fully committed to cleaning up our waterways, and we'll continue to move forward because we have a lot of work to do in that area.
So, Governor, it sounds like you haven't identified a source for funding going forward. What would that be?
Yeah, I'm not going to divulge that at this point, but I have an idea on what we can do, and it's within the existing resources. I think raising taxes is the last resort. I believe that we have enough capacity. We had a surplus for the first time in decades this last legislative session, about $65 million in surplus. I believe there's enough capacity with the economy heating up. If we focus on investing in the right areas, we can grow this economy organically without raising taxes and fees. We proved it for 2 years. I believe that there's enough capacity there without raising another tax.
When you talk about capacity, are you talking about bonding?
No, I'm talking about utilizing a specific source for the general fund.
And you're not going to identify that now?
I'm not going to at this point, no.
Okay.
Ms. Hallquist, I want to ask you about Act 250, and tell me, do you think that Act 250 is an impediment to development we need in Vermont, particularly affordable housing, and what changes would you envision, if any, in that law?
You know, I'm going to say Act 250 has been a very important part of Vermont for many, many years. It's allowed us to keep the character that we have. I've talked to some real estate developers that say, hey, basically, if you follow the rules, you can work through the system. And of course, in my business, we had Act 248, which is even kind of a step even up from Act 250, and we figured out how to work with that in the system. So, I spent many years working with many companies, and there's a kind of a philosophy that you take. If something's working, you constantly work to improve it. If something's broken, of course, you throw it out. Act 250 is working. We do make some modifications. I do think wherever we can make changes to make housing more affordable and easier to build, we should be doing that. But I will point out the basic problem with housing today is people just don't make a living wage. It takes $22 an hour to afford a two-bedroom unit today. And by the way, if the wages were adjusted for inflation in the late 60s, we'd have that. So since we don't have that, all the acceleration in the world isn't going to make housing cheaper. But I do support any improvements we can do to Act 250.
Governor Scott.
I would just say that some of the regressive tax burden that we placed on Vermonters has led to people needing to make more money and working 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. And there's another way to look at that. We could look at the spending side. But to answer your question, Act 250 has been important. It was put in place by a Republican governor back in the 70s because of overdevelopment. I believe that it can be improved, could be streamlined, more efficient, and more user-friendly. I've been through the process myself a few times. In fact, early on, when I was in my just out of college, starting my first business in Morrisville, as a matter of fact, a motorcycle shop, I got shut down by a lack of an Act 250 permit that I didn't really even realize I needed in a downtown like I was investing in. So I believe that we can do things better. There's a listening tour that's being utilized right now. There's a group that's going around the state listening to people where we go in the future, what we can do better. But we're working on that as well to try and find common sense changes to make it more user friendly, so it doesn't stop development. It just utilizes smart development, and I think that's the point. We may have in some instances because the commissions are all different throughout the state. I think there needs to be some symmetry there in terms of the commissions, and we'll need to advocate for that.
Anne Galloway has the next question.
Thanks, Dave. Governor, do you support building both large and small-scale wind, solar, and other renewable energy facilities, provided there's input from local communities?
Yeah, large-scale wind on our ridge lines is something that I'm opposed to, have been, and I don't believe that we need any more large-scale wind of any sort. Small-scale wind, we can debate that as long as it's okay with the community. Same with solar. I think that we get the biggest bang for the buck with solar. made incredible technological advances there. And I think that the answer is going to be in the future, and we're on the cutting edge of this, is storage capacity, battery storage, large-scale battery storage capacity. It will make so much more sense for renewables at that point. And we've got Dynapower out there, a great company in Vermont that's doing just that, again, right on the cutting edge. And if we could store this, and when we produce it, solar makes so much more sense than it ever did. But again, you need community involvement. But at the same time, I think this is where part of the answer is in solar.
So I didn't get quite the answer I was looking for on that question. Do you support large-scale solar as well?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Ms. Hallquist, what's your answer to this question?
Well, I will tell you that I spent 2+ years working with the Vermont Energy Investment Corporation on a grant from the Department of Energy to write a detailed plan to address these issues called Solar Pathways. We have that plan as probably the best plan in the country, how to get to 90% by 2050. I would make that the comprehensive energy plan for the state. And it requires the growth of wind. One of the basics to understand is when it comes to renewables, the wind blows like crazy in the winter when the sun doesn't shine. And the sun shines in the summer, the wind doesn't blow. You can't get enough electrical storage to carry that energy from July and move it to January. However, that said, that wind doesn't need to come from Vermont. I was the face of the Kingdom Community Wind Project, and I learned a lot from that project. If I looked at a do-over, I would allow all the communities. We took a vote with the town of Lowell, but I would have all the communities vote on those projects. And I would really leave it up to the communities in the viewshed to decide. I wouldn't make dictates from Montpelier. That said, we can get wind from the Midwest. The landed price of the Kingdom Community Wind Project is 10 cents a kilowatt hour. You can produce twice as much wind in the Midwest with a wind turbine, and there's a lot of locked wind in New York State. So we don't need to get our wind from Vermont. You can actually get wind for 5 cents from the Midwest. Costs about 2 cents to deliver it and get it here for 7 cents versus the 10 cents on the ridge line. So Vermonters can decide where they want the wind come from, but it has to be part of the solution.
Okay, Governor Scott, do you have a question on the environment you would like to put to your challenger, Christine Hallquist?
Well, yeah, I guess at this point in time, I would ask you again. You may have answered it, but maybe more succinctly. Do you support industrial wind line, ridge line development at this point in time, wind energy development large scale?
I support for all the communities to make their decisions together. I don't support dictates coming from the state. That's command and control management. That's not effective. Again, I don't care where the wind comes from, but the wind has to be part of the solution. You talk about getting to 90% by 2050, but you got to have a plan to get there. And we have a plan to get there. It's Solar Pathways. It's the best plan in the country. I've been committed to climate change since 2004. That's kind of a red herring saying where the wind comes from. I don't care where it comes from. We can get wind from the Midwest. It can be solved.
But ridge line development in Vermont, you're in favor of.
I didn't say I'm in favor of it. I'm saying let the communities decide.
Let me ask about the communities deciding, if I could. Greensboro, you can see the wind towers in Lowell from Greensboro, Craftsbury, other communities up in that area. Should other communities around in the viewshed of a big project like that have a say?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. That was my learning from the Kingdom Community Wind Project. So I would have Greensboro take part in the decision making.
So Colchester can see Georgia. You'd say that Colchester should be involved as well?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, that's going to have to about wrap it up this segment on the environment of our debate today. And we wanted to go to a miscellaneous round of questions. I will ask the first one. It's going to go to Governor Scott. Governor Scott, it appears that the threat of an attack on Fairhaven Union High School that prompted you to change abruptly your stance on gun control laws may have been exaggerated. Serious felony charges against the young man involved have been reduced significantly and may be resolved in family court. Do you think you might have jumped the gun on this, so to speak?
Yeah, I don't think it was exaggerated at all. Anyone who's read the affidavit and anyone that hasn't read it should, because it's very concerning, some of the answers that the young gentleman gave in terms of where he was. He was planning this. It wasn't a question of if, it was just a question of which day, and it was going to happen soon, right after Parkland. And he had a plan. He wanted to have more kills than Virginia Tech, and Virginia Tech was about 32. So I would say he was well down the road in terms of committing this horrific venture. And I don't believe it was exaggerated. I just believe that from a judicial standpoint, that there's nothing, there may not be as much to charge him on, but he was going to commit this, and I believe that with the good work of one brave young woman who came forward and good police work, we were able to thwart this effort.
Ms. Hallquist?
Well, I certainly will let the courts decide whether it was exaggerated or not, but I do want to compliment the governor on signing that gun legislation, the legislature's efforts to pass that legislation. I think that was very important work. It was a response to a situation. I do think we've got to do a lot more in terms of you can never get physical safety if you don't have emotional safety in schools. There's a lot of work to be done, but I do want to compliment the governor for signing that bill.
Okay, next question from Anne Galloway.
Thanks, Dave. Ms. Hallquist, should Vermont move to a tax and regulated marijuana market?
Oh, I absolutely believe we need to move to a tax and regulated marijuana market as quickly as possible, because we are in the most unsafe situation right now. People don't know where their marijuana is coming from. It has the opportunity to be laced with other drugs. Just from the simple standpoint of not knowing what chemicals were used to grow it, not knowing what herbicides were used to grow it. We've got a black market for marijuana right now. People need to have security and know where that comes from. This is a dangerous situation, and the most important thing we can do is move to a much safer way to handle this answer.
Governor Scott?
Yeah, I don't believe we're ready for that tax and regulate system at this point in time. We should be investing more in early education, prevention, as well as some roadside impairment tests that I believe are being developed. We need a better process to make sure that our roads are safe for our traveling public. I believe public safety is one of the highest priorities. The bill that we passed was a decriminalization bill of sorts, legalization by some reports. And if you follow that, and if you want to grow it yourself, you'll know where your pot comes from. But I don't think we're ready for a tax and regulation system right now. But we have opportunities to watch what other states are doing, make sure that we don't make the same mistakes that they did, and move forward in a very concentrated, common sense way.
Governor, I wanted to follow up on that and ask you, Vermont's current marijuana law just passed seems to have some internal illogic to it. For instance, if you grow a couple of plants, which you're allowed to do, and certainly if your plant were good enough to maybe win a blue ribbon here at the Tunbridge Fair, you'd probably have more of an ounce of pot, which is the maximum possession limit. So I'm wondering, does this law need further tinkering now in terms of fixing its internal contradictions?
Well, I do think that there are some improvements that should be made on the bill in terms of the way that some companies have interpreted being able to gift this in some way. I think that's a mistake. I think the Attorney General has said that publicly as well. And so there's always improvements to be made, and I believe that's one area where we should focus on.
Ms. Hallquist?
Well, I stand by the fact that we're in a dangerous place right now. We talk about safety. The most important thing we can do is move to tax and regulate so we can create a safer market for marijuana. Obviously, there's marijuana being exchanged that goes beyond what you're growing, and that's why we need to focus on safety.
Anne Galloway, next question.
Thanks, Dave. Governor, do you believe the state has been transparent enough about its own role in allowing the fraud at Jay Peak to continue unabated for 8 years?
Yeah, there's no doubt that mistakes were made, and I'm quite concerned about, in light of some of recent events, that we need to make sure that we provide all the information that we can. As you know, we've committed to rolling out some of the documents over a period of time here, and I believe if it was up to me, I would be able to put all the information, all the documents out on the front steps of the State House in order for everyone to see what happened and make the determination themselves. The Attorney General, who is our advisor, our legal counsel, is saying at this point in time we shouldn't be releasing all the documents, but that could come very soon from my standpoint. As well, that I believe the Attorney General again has control of this situation. We need to continue to listen to the advice of our counsel as we move forward. But to say we made some mistakes as a state, and I inherited this problem as well as the Attorney General. But we need to, with the auditor's help, looking this over, come to some conclusion.
But, Governor, you're in charge. Why don't you just let the records out?
Again, sometimes you have to listen. I'm not a lawyer myself. I have to listen to counsel and advice. And at this point in time, the Attorney General is saying we shouldn't release everything. But we may come to a point where we can release it all. But we're going to be releasing
anything yet.
Yeah, we're going to be, as you know, there's a plan in place.
Yeah,
we're going to be a million documents that are going to be rolled out.
What about just the documents that I've requested? I don't care about the million pages. I want the ones I requested.
Well, again, if you can convince the Attorney General, that's
a good
idea.
You.
I know you
You're
were.
on the podium.
I understand that, but as I'm saying, I take the advice of my counsel, my legal counsel, which is the Attorney General, and at this point in time, he doesn't think it's a good idea in terms of releasing that. When he says, gives the okay, the thumbs up, I'm all in.
Ms. Hallquist, what do you think about this issue?
Newport was my service territory, and I worked closely with those folks. And part of the cooperative thing we focus on is concern for community. You must say, as part of the residents up there, I was very excited about the possibility. I saw that I worked with Bill Stanger and watched that growth and that development and all the hope that created. Now we got this big hole in the ground in Newport. I think folks in Northeast Kingdom would feel much better if we had a third-party independent investigation into what everybody's involvement was. And, it doesn't matter who it is. I would like to know what the involvement is, what the data was, and what people knew when. It's real important, I think, for the residents in the Northeast Kingdom to get some kind of answer to what everybody's involvement was. I just like everybody else up there. I don't really know how deep this was in the state, but it definitely deserves transparency, openness, and a third-party investigation.
Well, again, I think we should note, though, that we do have the Attorney General has made a deal with the auditor, and the auditor is that third party that's going to take a look and investigate this. And as well, when you look at what's happened, and give credit where credit's due, I believe the Northeast Kingdom is much better off than it was 10 or 15 years ago as a result of EB5. Regardless of the black eye that we have right now in terms of how it was done, they're much better off than they were then. And the eyesore that's in Newport, we'll solve that. We have a plan moving forward with the community's help to develop that in a real way that will help the region. So I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, I believe it is time for our closing statements right now, and I want to go first to Ms. Hallquist. Your 2-minute closing statement, please.
So, I'm running for the forgotten communities in our state. When I talk about marginalized communities, we've got a lot of marginalized rural communities in the state that's been left out. And actually, all of the working class has been kind of left out of this economic growth. We can talk about all the jobs that were created, but if people aren't seeing real growth, it's not benefiting them. So when I focus on real economic development, I'm talking about measuring our economy from how the people on the lowest rung of the economic ladder are doing. And I also will tell you the time I made my decision to run was January 20th of this year when I was at the Youth Mart. I listened to these 4 young women that called themselves Muslim Girls Making Change. And they talked about what it was like to face harassment every day at school because of who they are. And I cried. That's when I made the decision to run, because I can certainly understand that and relate to that because of I was different growing up as well. So we could do better, and we can do a lot better. And I'm a big believer that focusing on where we want to go and having a positive vision is what leaders do. We can rebuild our rural communities. We'll connect every fiber home to every home and business. We'll create substantial wage growth and new jobs. And we're going to invest in our downtowns because people who want to move to rural will want a place to go. I'm going to work towards improved Medicare for all. When I hear people say, well, we can't afford to do improved Medicare, this is about being a civilized society. I get confused in politics when people talk about progressive, Democrat, or Republican. When I'm talking about a living wage, Medicare for all, and ending homelessness, that's not politics. That's called being a civilized society. Invest in our schools. We should never have children that go on the bus for 3 hours. And the school is the heart of our community. So when I talk about rural economic development, those schools are important. I'm going to address climate change. That's something I've committed my life to. And we'll solve the water quality problem. And anyway, I'm going to fight for the Vermont that I love and that has loved me in return. And I'm going to tell you, nothing's impossible when you're on the side of justice.
Okay, Governor Phil Scott.
Well, thank you. I'd like to start or end this talk and by thanking you, first of all, for allowing us this forum, but talking about the importance of leadership, whether it's been in business or politics or racing. I've always tried to treat people with respect and civility, tried to treat them the way I expect to be treated. And I mention this because our state's ability to grow the economy, make Vermont more affordable, and protect the most vulnerable all takes leadership. And I believe over the last 2 years I've shown my ability to lead our state. Sometimes it's controversial. Sometimes it's not what everyone wants. But the checks and balances we have with the legislature is an important process. It's a separate branch of government. There's always going to be tension there with the legislature, but we always have to keep each other on an even keel. So over the last 2 years, we've been able to develop budgets that didn't increase a single tax or fee. I'm very proud of that. We cut income taxes by $30 million. Very proud of that. Eliminated the tax on Social Security for low and moderate income Vermonters. Really proud of that as well. Prevented about $71 million in property tax increases over the last 2 years. That's something that's been necessary. And we made the single largest investment in housing Vermont has ever seen. And that leads to housing for our workforce, which we're in desperate need of. Tuition-free college for our National Guard members that serve our state and our country, again, so that we can be more competitive. We're doing the right things. We're doing the hard work, joint effort. Very proud of the team that I developed. So we just have more work to do. I'm very proud of the state and what we've done and accomplished, and look forward to doing more of it.
All right. Well, I want to thank our two candidates for governor very much, incumbent Republican Governor Phil Scott and Christine Hallquist, the Democratic nominee, for participating in our debate here on WDEV at the Tunbridge Fair. And thank you, audience, for helping us out watching the debate. And this has been, I think, a really, really good conversation. So I'm happy to have been involved in it. It's a great thing. And thank Anne Galloway as well for being my co-moderator. She's been doing a great job. We're going to take a brief break on the Dave Graham Show here on WDEV. We'll be back shortly. A little bit of analysis by Anne Galloway, and as well as John Walters of 7 Days will be joining me to talk about what we just heard. We'll be back. And we just did that, moderating today's debate between the candidates for governor here at the Tunbridge Fair. And once again, I want to thank our sponsors very much for helping us do this, the Central Vermont Chamber of Commerce, Champlain Valley Equipment, and GW Plastics, all helping us put on this program today. And it's been actually very enjoyable. I've learned some things about the two candidates, which I think is the point of the whole thing, and I've got a couple of other journalists here with me to talk about some of what they think were the big points of the debate. With me is John Walters of 7 Days, and of course we're going to continue to lean on my good friend Anne Galloway from VTDigger.org, who helped me moderate the debate and ask the questions. Got into a good back and forth with the governor there late in the debate about access to public records, which I agree with Anne is a very, very important thing in the conduct of state government. But let me start with John and ask you what jumped out at you about today's debate.
Well, I thought they both did a really good job. They were both articulate, presented their points of view, got in and out. I don't know if you ever had to stop them for time purposes or not. Usually politicians sort of run on and on endlessly.
I wagged my finger a couple times.
Yeah, but they got to the point. Christine Hallquist, I thought, presented a range of views. There had been some talk that her campaign is sort of being overwhelmed by her gender identity as the first trans woman running for governor under the banner of a major party. That only came up once or twice, and she presented a broad range of ideas and policy proposals and presented a pretty solid agenda, and Phil Scott defended his agenda.
Anne Galloway, what about you? What did you hear today that made you sort of sit up and take notice?
Well, what surprised me was that I found that the two candidates agreed on much more than I anticipated they would. For example, I think they both see the need for paid family leave. They disagree on how to pay for it. Christine Hallquist was not very direct about exactly what she would do to support that program, but the governor, reiterated his stance that he would not support any new taxes. I also found that they seemed to agree more than they disagreed on the carbon tax, which kind of surprised me. I mean, the governor has said absolutely no carbon tax. Christine Hallquist said not now, but it's worth studying so that we can figure out where we're going down in the future. So that kind of surprised me that there wasn't more of a divergence there in their points of view. I think where they differed the most had to do with schools. Christine Hallquist is adamant that she does not want to see rural schools closed, even it seems in cases where you have very few students in a high school, because she says that once you close the school, a community is really going to suffer, and that the infrastructure and the reason for a town for being could really disappear with the closing of the school. I think, Governor Scott made it clear that he believes that something has to be done on that front because the costs are too high. He reiterated that we're spending about $22,000 per student. Christine Hallquist said, well, we just need to bring more people into the state and we need to reinvigorate the economy, and that will solve our education problem.
That was what was interesting to me, too, is that both of them presented a very sort of pro-business, pro-development point of view. Oftentimes, the stereotypical thing is for the Democrats to maybe downplay that a little bit, and for Republicans to really talk up a pro-development point of view. But Christine Hallquist returned again and again to this theme, it seemed, of being a business person by background and of being someone who was lamenting the loss of some employers in a town like Rochester and wanting to bring employment back to rural areas of the state. And another point she emphasized quite a bit, the governor didn't really disagree, but he didn't seem as enthusiastic, was her call for strong deployment of rural broadband internet access and cellular service. Of course, we know something about that coming down to the Tunbridge Fair here this morning. Most of the way on State Route 110, there's little if any cellular phone service, so it is an issue for sure. Did you think Anne, that was a theme that sort of pro-development theme was something they both played on?
I agree, because they both seem to really be supportive of downtown developments. They both supported the tax increment financing program for downtowns and for businesses to move downtown. I think another area where they differed was on the tax and regulation of marijuana. The governor has said no way, and Christine Hallquist said it's about time. So
that is true that they did have a difference there. One other difference I heard was she was much more willing to entertain the idea of ridgetop large-scale wind power in our discussion about environmental and energy issues. It seemed as though she said she called for communities to be involved in that decision-making process, but did not want to close the door. The governor seems pretty strongly against the idea of more wind towers on mountaintops.
I think they agree on a lot of goals, a lot of outcomes. They disagree a lot on how to get from here to there. The governor wants to keep down spending, doesn't want to entertain any new taxes. He didn't specifically say that he would oppose any new taxes or fees in a second term, as he did in his first term. but he clearly wants to go that way, whereas Christine Hallquist sees a lot of areas where a timely investment of public funds could yield the kind of growth and the kind of development that all parties seem to want to see. So there is more of an openness on her part to new programs or expanded programs undertaken by the state, like a universal paid family leave, or like raising the minimum wage, or like investing more in broadband and in education. So there is a difference in the process rather than in the ultimate goal.
One thing that I noticed in Governor Scott's closing remarks was he talked about how there is always tension with the legislature between the legislature and a governor. It seems as though that tension has been turned up significantly in the last couple, and maybe it's just the contrast with the previous administration, where of course you had a Democratic governor and a Democratic Party controlled legislature. But even beyond that, I mean, I think the past administrations and their relations with the legislature, he seemed ready to talk about that. Perhaps I should have asked a more pointed question during the course of the debate about that. But did you hear that, and what did you make of it, Anne Galloway?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that the reality is that we had one of the longest sessions we've ever had, and, twice in a row, and we bucked up right against the end of the fiscal year, and the budget was, we almost had a government shutdown, and that's never happened before, and so for the governor not really to fully address that question, I think is a real problem, because at the end of the day, I think Vermonters expect the governor and the legislature to come to terms, even if they're from different parties and have different, views on things. People, I think, in Vermont expect the government to work. And so, there have been questions about the Scott administration's willingness to actually work with lawmakers in committee to hammer out bills. You've seen the appropriations committees really push back on proposals, and there's really been no attempt to work together on coming up with compromise early on, middle of the session, even at the end.
And John, I want to ask you one interesting thing here in the debate was the governor was talking about a funding source for cleaning up Vermont's waterways, including Lake Champlain. He said he has an idea, but he did not want to divulge what it is.
He has a plan.
Pieces at hand.
He has a secret plan.
So let me ask you, John Walters, is that going to sell with voters? Are voters going to be okay with saying, "Oh, the governor's got a plan, he's just not telling us what it is"?
Well, it depends on which voters you're talking about. I think voters who are more interested in the quality of our waterways than they are on, say, taxes, will want to know more. I think people who want to emphasize keeping affordability in mind and keeping taxes lower will be satisfied with the governor's assurance and his past record on taxes that he believes he can come up with the money. I have real qualms about that because he seems to be assuming that we will continue to have economic growth in the state. And we've already had the longest continuous growth period in the nation's history. And if we have a downturn of any sort, then he's going to have to start getting creative with where he finds the money.
And Anne Galloway, I wanted to ask if you have started yet to draft the public records request for all internal documents, emails, and other things related to the governor's plan to pay for cleaning up Vermont's waterways.
You bet. I was cogitating on it as you spoke.
Because Anne is maybe the leader probably is the leader among Vermont journalists for making public records requests of state government, trying to hold the government accountable. It's one of the reasons we love VTDigger.org, that terrific news website. And John, I wanted to ask you also if you saw there didn't seem to be quite as much snarkiness, vitriol, I don't know, as there was yesterday in the debate between Lieutenant Governor Zuckerman and his Republican challenger Don Turner, the House Minority Leader. They actually sort of were a little bit more feisty with each other. What did you think of the tone?
Well, I thought civility was the order of the day between the two. There were a few moments where they butted heads, but they butted heads honestly on issues. They weren't trying to score points necessarily. I think they have a lot of respect for each other. Right? They've known each other for a long time, and I think they each respect what the other has accomplished.
All right, well, that's going to have to about do it for this debate and analysis and the Dave Graham Show here from the Tunbridge Fair. Once again, I want to thank our sponsors, Central Vermont Chamber of Commerce, Champlain Valley Equipment, and GW Plastics. And don't forget the Billtown Barbecue, folks, another good sponsor of this show. Great barbecue in Williamstown, Vermont, right off of Route 14 on Depot Street. They have just terrific barbecue fare there. Don't forget to check them out. And we will be back Monday with another edition of the Dave Graham Show, and I want to wish everybody an excellent weekend.
This has been a special presentation of News Radio WDEV. This program has been produced by Dylan Deloge and moderated by Dave Graham, host of The Dave Graham Show, Monday through Friday from 9 to 11 on WDEV. Streaming at WDEVradio.com.